Hello, and welcome to part 7 of the fanfiction reading of I Need You So Bad by PrismaticBumbleby. And this probably will end up being the last part if I don't end up getting like all of these parts done in the normal time that I would do for a fanfiction episode, which would be like 25-30 minutes. I will just finish it because I don't think we have enough left to go for another episode. So we're just gonna go a night before. The room was quiet and not a sound could be heard, well, except for the tossing and turning of Yang Xiaolong. Yang hadn't been able to get any sleep in her old bed. It seemed so surreal being home again after 4 long years. Maybe that's why she was having trouble sleeping. Yang sighed and leaned up from her bed and threw the covers off herself. Now Yang was normally a very insulated person, always able to keep heat in, but tonight was different. Snow began to fall and it caused Yang to feel a whole lot colder than ever before. Yang wore a pair of black sweatpants and a long-sleeved yellow shirt for an added warmth. Yang peeked back at her sister that had her bed right next to hers. Still the same, just like when we were kids, Yang whispered to herself and turned her attention to the desk she had on her side of the room. Looking at all of the books that had been exactly where she had left them, Yang shook her head and began to look at each title of each book to find a very specific one. Here it is, Yang told herself, and pulled the book out and looked at the cover, just for added assurance. Yang nodded and headed out of the bedroom and straight to the kitchen. Yang stopped on her way and looked over as she heard a small crackle of a fire. "Dad?" Yang asked as she peeked her head into where she heard the fire. Oh, hey, little sun dragon," Taiyang responded as he looked over at his daughter with a typically huge smile. "Can't sleep?" Yang smiled back at her father and took a seat next to Taiyang and nodded. "Yeah, I don't know why though. I mean, I'm tired, but I'm not at the same time." "That's understandable, Yang. I mean, do you remember what tomorrow is, right?" Taiyang asked, leaning back against the couch with his attention still on the Golden Huntress. "Of course I do, Dad. And that means, I guess that's what got me so on edge. I just don't want to screw up in some way." Yang mumbled, and it caused Taiyang to let out a chuckle, but a controlled one. His normal ones could wake almost anyone, and that was not a good idea with 3 others in a house. Yang, you won't screw up. Look at you, so beautiful and strong," Taiyang said as he placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder and pulled her in for a warm hug. "I'm proud of you, so proud. You managed to overcome and conquer so much and never let anything bring you down. I think Blake is just perfect for you. So trust me, when tomorrow gets here, you'll feel brand new and even more happier." Wow, that's the grammar. "Even if you mess up, I don't think Blake will care." Yeah, maybe you're right, Dad. I mean, she's always cared for me." Yang began to smile and hugged her father tighter. "Thank you again, Dad. This means a lot to me that you even accept me for this choice." Taiyang began to return the hug from his daughter. "I will always accept you, Yang. She makes you happy, and that's all that matters to me. And, well, you love her, Yang." Yang pulled away and reached up to wipe the liquid away from her eyes that had begun to pour slightly from her father's words. "Thank you, again. Hey, come on, if you're up, I say we make something. You were always a great cook," Taiyang said with a smirk as he stood. "Sure, I mean, I don't really have anything else to do I?" Yang responded and stood from the couch, setting the book she had on the couch. Yang froze as she heard a knock at the door and looked up at her dad. "Who could that be?" Taiyang just began to smirk as he already knew who was outside the door and began to walk over to said door. "Who else would it be, Yang? He always used to do this," Tai said as his smirk turned into a smile as he turned back to Yang and opened the door to reveal the figure standing in the doorway. "I swear, I hate going out in the snow sometimes," the figure said, and Yang began to recognize the voice quite easily. "Uncle, what are you doing out at this time of night?" Yang asked as Crow stepped inside and laid his eyes on Yang. "Well, I can ask why you're up this late too, Yang," Crow responded and began to laugh slightly. "But seriously, I went to pick some things up for Tai and you four. Tai sent me here to get some things for your wedding tomorrow. Well, today." Yang felt a slight heat rise to her cheeks out of embarrassment as Crow mentioned their wedding. Thanks. Yang responded as she looked at the bags he had placed in his hands. Do you need help, Uncle? Yang asked as she walked over to mainly try to sneak a peek at whatever was within the bags. That's not going to work again, Yang. I know what happened last time when I brought something home for you that was supposed to be a surprise, Crow responded as he began to shake his head slightly. Yang sighed and crossed her arms. Oh, please, you really don't think I've grown out of that, Uncle? Yang asked, attempting to be as serious as possible. Nope, Crow said as he began to smirk and look around for a place to hide the bags so his niece wouldn't be able to look into the bags. Well, we're about to go cook, maybe. Then Yang has to get some sort of sleep before tomorrow, Taiyang spoke up, looking at the two and attempting to tear Yang's attention away from where Crow was going with the bags. Yeah, I guess. Well, let's go find what we can eat, I guess. Yang mumbled in response and headed back to their originally planned destination. Dang, I missed where he was going with those bags, Yang said under her breath before turning on the light and freezing as she spotted her soon-to-be wife standing in front of the window, drinking what seemed to be coffee. Blake? Yang asked, slightly confused at how long her fiancé had been in the kitchen without making a single sound. Oh, hey, Yang, you're up. Can't sleep either, right? Blake said as she turned her head to look at her golden-haired beauty. Yeah, when did you Yang stumbled over her words and looked back to not see her father anywhere near the kitchen. Must have been helping Crow hide the gifts. I was up a bit before you, dear. I also heard a bit of your conversation with Taiyang, and, well, I'm glad. Glad he's been a good father to you. Now come here and drink some coffee with me. God damn it. Yang began to scratch the back of her head in a sheepish manner and nodded, walking over and grabbing the pot and began to pour herself some freshly brewed coffee. Yang and Blake had just stood in the kitchen together, drinking coffee and just enjoying each other's company. Maybe not being able to sleep before the big day wasn't such a bad thing after all. Time. Yang sighed to herself, trying to take her mind off of the wedding. Blake was going to marry her. Blake's forever, Yang would say at times. She was right. Yang shook her head and looked out the window of her room. I have an hour before I need to get ready for everything, Yang mumbled to herself, looking out at the whiteness of the snow that covered the ground outside. Well, at least I have my semblance, Yang said to herself and hopped up from her bed and headed towards the door. She turned the handle slowly and snuck out of the room. She wouldn't have had to do so if Ruby wasn't still asleep in their shared room. Yang walked down the hall silently, giving a small yawn. The blonde soon made it into the living room and flopped down lazily against the couch, letting all of the breath lazy out before she breathed it all back in. Whatever. Yang's gaze traveled around the room, analyzing it to see how much she could remember. Her light keys focused on a small stain on the couch and she began to grin. I remember this. Me and Ruby spilled our milk and we tried to clean it up before Dad got home. Yang was talking to herself, reminiscing over the time she had with her sister when they were little. Just as Yang was... What? Oh my god. Just as Yang was about to move up from the couch, she felt a pair of arms around her neck. The arms were thin and quite pale. Okay, so it's either Blake who's going to love on me, or... That sounds weird. Or Weiss who's going to choke me to death. Yang began to joke with whoever was behind her, but then heard a small giggle. No, it's just me, Yang, not Weiss, the voice said, and Yang could already tell before she opened her mouth that it was Blake. Toying with the girl just made it funnier. Yeah, I figured it was you, Blake. Why don't you come here and sit down, Yang said, and turned her head to the faunus, getting a clear look at the girl and her slightly messed up hair, which caused Yang to smile slightly. Blake nodded and unraveled her arms from the blonde-haired teen and moved to sit next to her. Yang moved an arm around the faunus and pulled her as close as she possibly could. So, are you ready for today? Blake asked, her amber hues looking up at her fiancé, who simply nodded and kissed her head. Of course I'm ready, Blake. Today is going to be amazing. I can feel it, Yang responded, gently stroking along the girl's arm. Yang reached and grabbed the remote from the coffee table and turned on the television, making sure to turn it down as soon as it came on. Wouldn't want to wake anyone else in the house. After a few minutes of watching the television, the two heard a door close and looked back to see who it was. They were met with a pair of silver hues staring at them in a tired manner. Yang, Blake, what are you doing up so early? Ruby asked, walking up to the two girls slowly. Ruby, it's not that early, Yang responded, which Ruby gave a small shrug. The two girls watched Ruby walk into the kitchen and then turned their attention back to each other. Do you think she knows who's following her? Blake asked, tilting her head slightly as she remembered seeing the heiress right behind the small huntress. Well, most likely not. Ruby isn't exactly that responsive in the mornings at times, so we might hear a scream. Yang responded as the two waited for the scream. All they heard was a gasp, and Yang shrugged. Well, it wasn't a scream, but it was something. And Yang hopped up from the couch and began to stretch. So, pancakes? Wow, that was terrible. So, pancakes? Okay, that was still terrible. I don't know how to say things. Whatever. Pancakes! Blake watched Yang stand up from the couch, and she nodded, getting up as well and standing behind the blonde. Sure, I could go for something to eat, Blake responded and followed Yang as she made her way into the kitchen. Ruby and Weiss turned their attention to the other two girls that came in the kitchen. Morning, you two, Weiss said, her icy hues moving from the mug in her hand to the blonde-haired huntress as well as her fiancé. Morning, I'm guessing you gave Ruby quite the scare, Yang responded, moving to the cupboard to pull out the pancake mix. Well, she did, but it was just payback from the night before, Ruby said, a smirk beginning to form on the girl's face. Oh, so that's whose scream I heard, Yang said, and Weiss began to glare at the silver-eyed huntress. Oh, come on, Weiss, it was funny, Ruby said, and reached up to stroke the heiress' cheek gently. Weiss gave a small sigh and shrugged. I guess. Blake looked at her friends and shook her head slightly. You three know we've known each other for 4 years, right? The three other girls turned their heads towards the Faunas, and each of them gave a slight nod. Yep, and I'm glad I was able to know all of you and lead you all. It was such an amazing time, Ruby said as she smiled at her team, a fully grown and powerful team with amazing capabilities. We're still going to be a team, Rubes, maybe just not that often anymore. I mean, I really hope we can visit each other often, Yang said, and pulled her sister in for one of her classic sisterly hugs. Of course we are, you dunce, Weiss spoke up at Yang's words. We might not be able to see each other that often, but we're still going to be a team. That's why I have a gift for each of you after the wedding. Weiss finished and tugged on Ruby's sleeve. Speaking of which, we all should be getting ready for it. Come on, Ruby, Weiss added to her girlfriend and pulled her away from the two soon be wed. Jesus. Blake and Yang stared at each other for a while before Yang leaned down and pressed a small kiss to Blake's lips. I'll see you then, Blake, Yang said, and Blake pulled the blonde closer, pressed a firm kiss to her lips before letting her go. I'll see you too. Love you, Yang smirked at Blake's words and nodded. Love you. I love how they just forgot about making pancakes. Yang turned and headed back towards her and Ruby's room and peeked her head in to see Weiss standing in the room. Well, come on, we only have a bit of time left before the wedding, Weiss said and motioned for her to hurry. Yang stepped inside and closed the door behind herself. What are you doing in here, Weiss? Weiss pointed to the dress. Get it on. I'm in here to make sure the dress isn't put on wrong. Ruby said she wouldn't know how to help, so she's helping Blake with her tux. Yang tilted her head and moved over to the dress and took it out of the bag carefully and moved to put it on. Blake is wearing a tux? Yang asked, and Weiss nodded, leading Yang over to the stool to stand on so she could examine the dress. Yeah, I think all she said was something about not wanting to feel uncomfortable or something. I can't remember. Weiss shrugged and looked over to the dress. The dress seems to be fine. We just have to zip it up. Hold your hair up, Weiss said, and watched as Yang did what she was told. The heiress grabbed the zipper and zipped it up. They're not too tight, Weiss asked, moving around in front of Yang. Nope, feels perfectly fine, Yang responded and moved off the stool. Feels kind of weird. Never thought I'd be in a wedding dress, Yang mumbled and moved towards the door but was stopped by Weiss. Where do you think you're going? You can't leave this room until the wedding starts, and plus we have to get your makeup done, Weiss said and pulled the girl towards the desk and watched as Yang groaned and sat down in the chair. Weiss rolled her eyes and smiled. Come on, you'll thank me when it's over. In the other room, Blake and Ruby looked at their reflections in the mirror. Do you think Yang is going to cry? Ruby asked, tilting her head at the Faunas with curiosity. I don't know, Ruby. Why? Blake responded and turned her attention to the silver-haired huntress. Well, isn't that what normally happens at weddings? The bride ends up crying. Wait, we have two brides. Are you going to cry, Blake? Ruby's questions were filled with curiosity as she asked them, which Blake just smiled at the girl's curiosity. I might, but Yang will probably do the same, so I'm not sure it's going to be all fine. Blake responded and gave a small nudge to the girl's side. which caused Ruby to jump and move away from the fondness. I'm sure when you and Weiss get married, she'll cry, Ruby grinned and nodded. Most likely, she almost cried when we kissed, if I remember correctly, Silver-haired Huntress said in response and moved to the window and looked out at the snow-covered ground. After a while, Taiyang came at Blake's door first. Okay. Whatever. Hey, Blake, it's time. We need you to come out. To come out first. Just like you requested. Ruby, go away with Yang, he said, and stepped to the side to let Blake out and headed for the small tent that was set up outside for the wedding. And then Tai knocked on Yang's door and opened it to let Ruby in, and Tai felt her eyes beginning Tai felt his eyes beginning to sting with tears almost as he watched Ruby walk over to hug her sister. My beautiful daughters, I love you two so much. He mumbled and walked further and closed the door behind himself and pulled the two into a hug. Weiss stood there awkwardly as she attempted to look away from their family moment before her. Before she knew it, she was pulled into the hug and felt the warmth coming from the three others. Tai began to chuckle as he held the girls. You're a part of this family too, Weiss. If Blake was here, she'd be pulled in too, but she can't see the bride yet. Tai finished and leaned back from the girls and shook his head. I'm feeling older every day I look at you and your sister, Yang. Blake pulled down the walked down the stone path to the tent that was set up to allow an easy way to the tent without touching the cold snow. Once Blake reached the tent, she was greeted by her parents. Gira smiled and picked his daughter up and began to chuckle loudly. My daughter is getting married. This is such a wonderful time. Callie smiled and patted Gira's arm. Dear, let her down. Don't need to ruin her tux, she said, and watched him put their daughter down. Mom, Dad, how do you two know about the wedding and even where it was being held? Blake asked and watched her parents begin to smile at each other. Me and Tai used to know each other a while back. I'm surprised he contacted me. I'm glad he did, because now I get to see my daughter and her wedding. I also can't wait to meet the lucky girl, Gira said and watched his daughter with glee. But why? What? I even want to finish this sentence. It should be obvious to question why, I don't know, Blake would make sure they're at the wedding. Because, that's, kind of, a thing that she has to do, but whatever. Apparently the answer is no. Gira said, okay. Blake was confused slightly. Okay, not gonna ask how you and Tai know each other, but you're okay with me marrying a woman? Blake asked, and Callie began to giggle and pulled Blake into a hug. Silly, we don't care. We raised you to follow your art, but also listen to your head. I'm sure you did both when choosing her. We're proud of you. Blake felt another pair of arms wrap around them and knew they were her father's. Thanks. I'm glad you two approve of us then. It means a lot to me, Blake said and leaned against their parents. You mean a lot to us, Blake, Gira whispered and stroked his daughter's back. Well, we should go get our seats, Callie said, and Gira nodded and gave his daughter a final hug before moving to one of the benches. Blake was then greeted by someone she wasn't exactly sure would show up. Son? Blake asked and he nodded. Yep, I came to watch your wedding. I'm happy for you, Blake, the male faunus said and gave her a smile. This is what makes you happy, and I'm glad it does. Blake returned his smile and nodded. Thanks, son. Blake moved to the altar and looked out at the benches filled with people from her kingdom and even from the school and what seemed to be people that Tai knew and invited. Even Ozpin made it. Ruby and Weiss walked into the tent and stood near the front of the altar and smiled. If you would all please stand, Weiss announced, and Blake could feel her heart beginning to race in her chest as she saw the people stand up and could already feel her partner's semblance. Yang walked inside the tent, Tai Yang escorting her along the way as she smiled behind the veil. Yang stood at the altar looking at Blake with tear-filled eyes. The priest smiled and looked at the girls before he started. Thank you all for coming to this wedding. The priest smiled as he looked at the two about to be wed. Blake Belladonna, do you take Yang Xiaolong to be your lawfully wedded wife, through whatever happens, he asked, and Blake nodded without hesitation. I do. The priest turned to Yang. And do you, Yang Xiaolong, take Blake Belladonna to be your lawfully wedded wife, through whatever may come? Yang didn't hesitate when she responded, I do. And I now pronounce you both wife and wife. The rings, please. The priest said, and Ruby came over and held the rings to her sister and Blake. Yang took one of the rings and slid it onto Blake's ring finger, and Blake did the same. Now you may kiss the bride. The priest finished, and Blake removed the veil and pressed her lips gently against Yang's own. There were cheers from the crowd, and Gear and Tai were crying as they watched the entire scene before them. Yang smiled and whispered to her wife, "I love you." And Blake whispered back, "And you know I love you too, Yang." Yang and Blake turned out to the crowd and smiled. Yang's eyes watched as a crow flew into the tent without disrupting anyone and took its place next to a raven that apparently had been there the entire time. Yang watched the two birds and smiled at them and gave a small nod before throwing the flowers to the crowd and interlacing her fingers with Blake's own. Ruby smiled as she watched the two now wedded girls, her head leaning against Weiss's shoulder. "Weiss, I want to get married," Ruby mumbled. Weiss felt her cheeks beginning to heat up as she nodded. "Maybe one day, Ruby." Ruby smiled and gave a small giggle. "Well, at least I was right that they both end up crying." And there's a poll, which doesn't matter, and a nice ad. Wow, this is this again. So I think there's like 2 more actual chapters, because there's like some other stuff at the end that are not actually chapters. Yeah, it looks like that's what it is. Okay. Which house? Which is, certainly interesting. Yang looked around as she and her wife were riding in the back of a vehicle. The vehicle was being driven by Winter, Weiss's older sister, who offered to drive them to go house hunting. Ruby had sat next to the recently married couple, while Weiss sat up front with her sister. "So, Winter, what made you want to come and help us go house searching? I mean, I'm thankful and all, but why?" Yang asked, the question bugging her. She wanted it to be answered. Winter looked up in the rear view mirror, locking her icy gaze onto the flaxen haired woman. That has a rather simple answer, Yang. It's because I just wanted to. You two needed a ride to go find houses, and I felt like it'd be a pleasant idea if I were the one to drive you. Maybe we'll even go out and eat. That's up for all of you to debate anyways. It's a celebration," Winter stated, turning down a street and keeping her eyes focused on the road. "Oh, okay, Winter. Thanks, by the way, and thank you in advance if we go to eat. Hopefully we do go out and eat if you say we are. I don't want to be like an author that promises to write more." God damn it. I don't want to be like an author that promises to write more and then waits for like 2 weeks. Yang responded, smiling slightly as she nuzzled Blake's head that was currently on her shoulder. Ugh! Obviously the author is talking about themselves right there. I can only assume. Let's see what these comments are about. Self-depreciation is real. Fuck, stop breaking the fucking wall. Alright. Winter eventually stopped in front of a decent-sized home, smiling softly as she removed her seatbelt after turning the car off. This is a nice home. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, a wide kitchen, a dining room, and an excellent backyard. Let's go take a look. I wouldn't necessarily call it a decent-sized home. Okay, that makes sense. I didn't even pay attention. "An excellent backyard. Let's go take a look," Winter said, pulling the key to the house from her pocket. Weiss blinked as she watched her sister pull out the key. "How do you have the key? Are you some real estate agent or something?" Weiss asked, crossing her arms at her sister and tilting her head. "Not even close, dear sister. I just requested the keys to the houses we'd be looking at. I've chosen houses that would suit your needs, Blake," Winter responded, removing the keys from the ignition and stepping out of the car and watching everyone do the same. I mean, you would kind of need to remove, or I don't know, I guess you just turned it off and then, remove. So she turned it off, removed her seatbelt, and then took the keys out, which meant that which means that she turned the key, turned it off, and unbuckled her seatbelt, and then pulled the key. Sorry. Anyways, Winter pocketed the car keys and headed up the stone path up to the front door. Ruby gasped slightly, reaching to cling on Weiss's arm. "Whoa, Weiss, look at it. It's so beautiful here," Ruby stated, walking along the path, following Winter. "What do you think so far, babe? Pretty good, huh?" Yang asked, holding her wife's hand, moving slowly down the stone path to examine the front yard. There were full-grown trees along the path and There were full-grown trees along the yard and along the path. The place was absolutely gorgeous to Yang as well as Blake. Yang grinned and let go of Blake's hand, running behind one of the trees and grinning. "Where did I go, Blake? Can you guess?" "Oh, God," Yang asked, containing a giggle as she moved behind another tree. Blake sighed and rolled her eyes in a playful manner, summoning a clone of herself to meet Yang at the other end. She pointed to one side of the tree, and the clone nodded as Blake went for the other side. Yang froze as she saw the clone of Blake appear on her side. "Aw, darn, you caught me, Blake," Yang said, moving back to stumble into a small frame, tilting her head back to see a grinning raven-haired faunus. Blake looked at her clone as she felt her wife in her arms. She nodded and the clone disappeared. "Well, I found you." "Blake, that's not fair. Using clones isn't fair at all," Yang complained, crossing her arms and huffing slightly before she turned and gently patted her wife's cheek. "But I'll let you get away with it just this once," Yang added, grabbing Blake's hand and leading her back to the path. "You guys are probably wondering where we went to," Blake said, looking up at the house, and then her amber hues locked on to the slightly cracked open door. And they soon stepped inside and looked around at the spacious hall that greeted all visitors that came into its domain. "Wow, talk about fancy," Yang said, letting go of Blake's hand to look at all the expensive-looking stuff that stood along the wall. Yang's eyes soon found themselves looking into a mirror and back at herself. She examined herself closely, watching as a raven-haired faunus soon made her way to her and curled her arms around her waist. Yang's cheeks brightened slightly as she watched Blake's hand make their way to her stomach, and she held her hands on her own, her free arm wrapping around Blake's head as she gave her forehead a gentle kiss. They stayed for a couple of minutes before Yang began to giggle slightly. "It seems like we're posing for a picture and I'm pregnant or something, huh, Blakey?" Blake blinked and sighed slightly, stifling a grin. "Oh, hush, Yang." Blake grabbed the blonde's hand and began to lead her to the source of talking that was coming from the living room. Their eyes focused on the forms of Weiss, Winter, and Ruby. "Hey, girls, did you miss us?" Yang asked, leading herself and her girlfriend to the three. "Well, yes, actually," Winter started, turning to face the two that were now walking up to them. "Where did you two go off to?" Weiss smirked and rolled her eyes. "They were probably playing some weird game," Weiss said. "Quiet, princess. You don't play games with Ruby," Yang retorted, giving her own smirk as Weiss blushed. "Anyways, it seems that no one has came to claim their furniture. Everything is still here. Only things that are gone seem to be personal things and electronics," Winter said, looking around and walking over to the television stand, humming quietly as she examined it closely. "Kitchen is next. Come," Winter said, leading the four girls towards the kitchen, which was humongous. The wood used for cabinets was mahogany, and the countertops were all granite. The four stared in astonishment at the kitchen, moving in slowly to examine it closely. There was a counter in the middle, allowing for more space to be prepared for food or just to set things. Yang's eyes shifted towards a small bar accompanied by two chairs. So this is where kids would eat in the morning, huh?" Yang asked, looking back at Winter, who gave a nod. "Yes, I suppose kids could finish their breakfast meals there, but adults can use it as well. If you two ever engage in drinking activities, that's not a bad place to do it," Winter responded, moving towards the fridge as Blake did the same. Blake stared at the two doors on the fridge, moving to open one as Winter opened the other. A gush of coldness hit Blake as she opened the freezer half, causing Blake to shiver slightly at the coldness. "Okay, that's pretty cold." Winter looked at the fridge closely and onto herself. "Yes, this is one of the best fridges you could possibly get. Next is the dining hall," Winter said, looking around to find Ruby eyeing the dishwasher closely. Ruby?" Weiss asked, poking her girlfriend's shoulder gently. "Come on, it's time to leave the kitchen." Ruby looked up from the dishwasher and nodded, standing up and looking at the washer again. "Hey, Winter, what is that thing?" Ruby asked, still curious about the dishwasher. About the washer. "It's a dishwasher. It washes your dishes for you," Winter responded, leading the girls into the dining room, smirking as Ruby just responded with, "Ooh." The four examined the dining room. The oak wood table was polished and had some fancy designs along the legs. Yang's eyes soon shifted from the table to the cabinets that had windows showing off expensive plates and even a tea set. People here must have been loaded. Yang stated, eyeing the plates before she turned and headed towards the window that had given the dining room a bit more light. She stared out at the front yard again, looking through the many trees that dotted the yard. Blake tugged on Yang's sleeve to get her attention. Come on, we're heading upstairs. Yang nodded and soon followed the others up along the stairs. So as I've said, 4 bedrooms. One is a guest room, so I won't bother showing you all that room, Winter said, leading the girls down the hall to one of the rooms and opened his door. The room wasn't big, but it also wasn't agonizingly small either. The room was clearly meant for a child to sleep in. Winter then Winter then led them to another bedroom, which is the same size. Kids' room's nothing too special, Winter said, finally getting to the master bedroom. Winter pushed open the door and stepped in, allowing the other girls to follow. This room was probably the biggest in the entire house, and the bed was probably one of the largest all of them had ever seen. It had curtains that came down to cover whoever chose to sleep there. Yang walked over and smiled as she began to pull back the curtains and fell face first onto the bed, smiling as the bed soon began to move under her form. Oh, my dust, this bed is so comfy, she said happily, soon beginning to roll around. Blang pulled back and looked at a blushing Blake who was staring at her while the other 3 were examining the room in more detail. You're so cute sometimes, Yang, Blake mumbled, leaning and pressing a firm kiss against Yang's lips, which caused them both to blush a bright crimson. Ooh, I found the closet, Yang stated happily, looking at the walk-in closet with a giggle, dashing in and running along the open wall like a closet. Walk-in closet? Yang asked, tilting her head up towards Winter. Walk-in closet, Winter responded, moving towards another door and swung it open, revealing the large bathroom. Ruby, stop running back and forth. You're going to get sweaty and exhausted, Weiss demanded, grabbing her girlfriend by the hood and dragging her towards the rest of the girls that had now made their way into the bathroom. Their eyes focused on a curtain, and Winter pulled it back, revealing a shower. Just in case you want to shower, but not also be inside a tub. That can get kind of irritating, Winter said, moving further in and looking at a large bathtub. And a tub large enough so you don't have to worry about your legs cramping up in your toilet, obviously, Winter said, finally turning towards the others. This place is so awesome, Yang exclaimed, smiling and clinging to her wife's arm happily and nuzzling against her. We'll take it. Do you know how much it is, Winter? Yang asked, staring up at the ivory-haired military officer. Don't you worry about that. I have everything already covered, actually. Just let me give the owner a call, and we'll go see him to give you the deed to this house and the land as well, Winter said, pulling out her phone to dial a number. Winter stopped, not of her own self-will, but because she had arms wrapped around her tightly. Yang, what are you doing? Winter asked, causing Yang to giggle as she shook her head and hugged a bit tighter. You're so awesome and sweet, Winter. Thank you, Yang responded, letting her go and walking over to her wife and pulling her into a warm hug as well. Once Winter felt air returning to her lungs, she shook her head and smiled slightly. Yeah, I'm only doing this because you're practically family, and with your sister dating mine and all. Plus, we have more than enough for this place. Enjoy it, you two, and also, I hope you're all ready. I have reservations at a restaurant tonight, and all of us are going, Winter said gleefully, dialing a number and beginning to talk to the owner. Well, we have a home now, Yang mumbled, nuzzling into raven-colored locks. What are you talking about? Blake asked, leaning into her wife a bit. With you, I always have a home, Blake added. Yang felt her cheeks heating up at Blake's words as she rolled her eyes and gently began stroking her cheek, her back. Sorry. Wow. You know what I meant, dork. Loose ends. Which should be the final chapter, because I believe the 2 things that are left are also are just like, the author's things or whatever. Yang's eyes jolted open, scanning the room intensely. Yang was sweating as she panted quietly, sitting up on the bed as she gripped whatever. She focused on the space where her wife would have been sleeping. However, she wasn't there. Yang was getting slightly worried about it all and soon found herself walking down the halls of her new home, which was quite big. Her eyes scanned each room, but eventually she moved downstairs to try to find her lover. Yang heard a small clank against the bowl in where the kitchen was. The blonde kept herself alert, but still tried to relax slightly. I mean, who could possibly break into their new home? Winter had installed it with the best security she could, and it was working quite well. Yang stepped in the kitchen, her eyes softening as they lay on the frame of her wife. Blake, what are you doing up at this time of night? Yang asked curiously, her head tilting as she leaned against the counter where Blake was. Blake brought the spoon from the bowl and placed it into her mouth, which still had a bit of milk on it. It's 6 in the morning, hon. I just wanted to make some cereal. I would have waked you, but you seem too peaceful and cute. Sorry about that. Blake noticed the bit of sweat covering Yang, but also the faint blush that she always managed to get out of the blonde, even after 4 whole years of being together. You okay, Yang? You're covered in sweat. Blake's voice held concern for her wife as she slowly leaned in closer to further examine the brawler. Huh? Oh, I just had a bad dream, that's all. Yang responded, waving her hand slightly at Blake as an attempt to change the subject. Well, what was the dream about? Maybe I can help. Yang stared at Blake slightly. Her question wasn't hard to answer, but she felt slightly embarrassed explaining a bad dream. She was supposed to be fearless. Nevertheless, Yang spoke clearly as she leaned against the faunus, who had begun to run her fingers through the blonde's hair. How to start? I mean, I remember bits and pieces, but it wasn't exactly a nightmare. But it still scared me. All I remember is seeing my mother, you know. I showed you a picture before, Yang said clearly, her fingers pressing against Blake's skin and as her hand held on to the faunus' shoulder. Maybe you should see her. Dreams sometimes give us answers to certain things that are troubling us. It could be that your subconscious is telling you to find your mother, Blake responded, her amber hues locked firmly on the form of her partner, while her hand continued running through the blonde's hair. At first, Yang wasn't sure how to respond to Blake. Finding her mother would be easy, but actually speaking to her? Was she ready to talk to someone who had abandoned her and her father for years? Yang just sighed and shrugged slightly. I guess, Blake, I just don't know if I can talk to her. It's not going to be easy, Yang responded, lifting herself off of the faunus and locked her eyes with the other girl's own. I know, Yang, but that's why I'm going to be there with you. I'm not going to let you do that all on your own. That'd be awful for anyone to do. Remember the promise that we made to each other at the altar? You know, all that stuff, marriage meaning I'll do this and that? Yeah, I meant it, and I know you do too. That's why you're not going to ever be alone with whatever you're going to be facing, no matter how big or small the problem is. Blake sealed her statement with a firm kiss to Yang's lips, letting it linger for at least a minute before pulling away. Yang nodded. She believed her wife with every fiber of her being. She believed in her, trusted her. Thank you, and yeah, you know that I'll do the same for you, Blake. Yang mumbled back, embarrassment getting the best of her again. Blake only nodded before getting up and looking back at the blonde. How about I cook you something, Blondie? Yang tilted her head slightly as she looked towards the raven-haired woman next to her. Sure, I mean if it's not too much of a trouble, Blake. Yang responded, crossing her arms slightly as she smiled at the faunus. How about some pancakes and eggs? Blake asked, to which Yang nodded her approval. Blake only nodded back, moving towards the fridge and pulling out 2 eggs and placing them on a nearby counter. Her eyes then moved towards the cabinet, and she moved over, opening it and pulling down batter for the pancakes. How would I cook the eggs? You can handle the pancakes, Yang asked, standing from her seat, handed over to pick up the eggs. Yang moved next to Blake and grabbed a bowl from one of the cabinets and another one for her wife. I guess that'll be fine, Yang, Blake said, taking the bowl graciously as she began to pour the dry batter into the bowl. Okay, let's see. I need milk. That's it? Seriously? That's pretty easy, Blake mentioned, as she moved back towards the fridge, pulling out the carton of milk they had. Blake's ears twitched as she heard another loud crack, followed by Yang cursing under her breath. Need another egg? Blake asked, reaching into the fridge to pull out the entire thing of eggs. Yeah, you just decided to bring the whole thing. Good idea, huh? Yang scratched the back of her head sheepishly as she watched Blake walk over with the eggs. Blake sat them down gently and nodded at her wife before she moved back to do her own thing. Pouring the correct amount of milk into the batter was easy. Now she just needed to stir all together. Blake heard another loud crack before she sighed and shook her head. She moved over towards Yang and held her arms from behind. Listen, be gentle, okay? It's not a grim egg. Just be easy, Blake stated, making Yang grip the egg and gently bring down. She tapped it gently a few times, and soon there was a small cracking noise. There we go. Now you got the rest, right? Blake asked, looking up at the slightly taller girl. Yang nodded and giggled slightly. Yeah, I got it. Thanks, Blakey, she said, leaning down and giving Blake's cheek a gentle kiss. Blake only mumbled something incoherently as she nodded and moved back. Blake headed and grabbed a wooden spoon from one of the drawers and began to mix the batter with the milk. Once the batter was done mixing, Blake moved to the stove, placing the batter a few inches away from the stove while she grabbed a skillet. After she placed the skillet down, she got another one for her blonde-haired wife. Blake began pouring the batter, letting it fall into a perfect circle in the skillet. Blake watched as Yang did the same with her skillet, pouring all the eggs she scrambled onto the skillet. Blake watched as the pancakes began to heat up, causing her to reach and grab one of the spatulas and flip them one by one. Yang stirred the eggs, causing them to begin forming a squishy-like solid. Blake's ears twitched as Yang began to hum some random tune before she spoke up. "Hey, Blake." "Yeah, Yang," Blake responded, keeping her eyes on the pancake as she flipped them. "I don't think I ever got to meet your parents. I mean, sure, there was the wedding, but I never got to meet them under different circumstances," Yang noted, moving her eyes away from the eggs for a moment to look at her wife. "I'd like to meet them soon," she added, reaching and turning off the heat to the skillet. Well, I don't see a problem in that, Yang. Sure, you can meet them whenever they want me to come see them for a while, or they may want to come here to see us," Blake responded, turning the heat off to her burner as well, shaking the skillet slightly before she moved to one of the other cabinets to pull out a plate for the food. Blake moved back and began placing the pancakes on top of each other as she looked back at Yang. "Go sit back down, hon. I'll take care of the rest." Yang only nodded, giving her a smile as she moved back to sit. Blake took the skillet that had the eggs and poured the scrambled eggs onto the plate, letting them take up the other side of the plate. God, please. Just stop repeating words over and over. It's like the most annoying thing about some of these. They're about, probably this one specifically, because it's one of the only ones, because it's whatever. Blake grabbed the fork and knife, placing it onto the plate and heading towards Yang. "Here you go," Blake said, placing the plate down in front of her with a proud smile. "Thanks, Blakey," Yang responded, picking up the knife and fork, beginning to eat. I love how you have plate 4 times in one paragraph. Yeah, after Yang finished her breakfast, Blake took the plate and placed it in his sink, stretching herself out. "Well, I guess if we're going to go see my mom, we should go get properly dressed," Yang said, standing up and grabbing Blake's hand gently, leading her back up the stairs to get dressed. Yang opened the closet door and stepped in, looking around at her side of the closet with a small grin. "I'm so glad we got this house," Yang stated, scanning over what to wear. "I am too, actually. It's such a nice house," Blake mentioned, looking over her own choice of clothes. Blake paused as she noticed a small box in the corner of the closet. She walked over and picked up the box. It wasn't too heavy, but it had some weight. "Yang, this is addressed to you, but it doesn't say who it's from," Blake stated, looking at the small note that was left on it. Blake didn't read it. She just decided to hand it to the blonde. Yang scanned over the box and the note. She hummed. Oh my god. She hummed before. She hummed quietly before she began to read the note aloud. "Dear Yang, may this help you with your missions. Wear it if you want, just accept my gift." Yang blinked for a moment before she placed the box down and began to unpackage whatever was inside. Inside seemed to be what looked like a set of armor. "Hey, Blake, isn't this some sort of armor?" she asked, holding up what seemed to be the chest piece of said armor. It looked oddly familiar to samurai armor, black and red. Try it on. I want to see if it looks good on you," Blake stated, her eyes scanning over the armor for a moment and turning towards the blonde. Yang only nodded and took out every piece that was inside. She pulled out a fairly smooth one-piece outfit. Yang also noticed a pair of fingerless gloves as well. After about a few minutes, Yang had everything on. She looked prepared for a war. Blake tapped her chin as she looked her wife over for a moment. Not too bad, Yang. I like it on you," Blake stated, smiling and moving over to kiss Yang. "You look like a warrior, which is kind of cute," Blake added. Yang only blushed and waved her hand. Yeah, sure." Yang felt her insides on fire with approval as she grinned and looked down at the armor. "This is sweet." Okay, so then some other just telling you things are happening, and it hasn't been updated since earlier this year. So that means that in theory this is over. There probably technically is more that's going to happen, but yeah, it's about all I can do right now. And because it's been 44 minutes, I don't really want to do anything else. So, well, obviously, there's nothing else to do. I don't know. Shut up. Next time, a new fan fiction, which actually should have been after last time. Oh boy. This This one might be fairly interesting, as I can tell already.